If you're struggling with perfectionism, if you're constantly seeking other people's approval or find yourself in broken relationships, then today's episode of Answering the Call to Write is for you. My special guest today is going to share with us how we can use the keys we have to make a significant change in every area of our lives. It's time to come out of the shadows and discover your authentic self and enjoy meaningful relationships. Welcome, awesome authors. You are listening to the Answering the Call to Write podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Farndale, and this episode is brought to you by Paper Crown Media. Hello, awesome authors, and welcome to this episode of Answering the Call to Write. My special guest today is originally from southern Saskatchewan in Canada, but she moved to the Pacific Northwest when she was 22 and pursued a career as a counselor. Over the last 3 decades, she's helped people to get unstuck from their past and move into a more promising future. And today, she's taken all of that expertise and put it in an amazing book called The Keys to Unlock Life Without Limits. We're going to unpack all of the treasure, or some of the treasure, I should say, in her book today, because we only have a few minutes or half an hour. But we're going to look at some of these truths in the book that she has written and also get to know her a little bit more. So my wonderful guest is Glenda Bigalky. Glenda, welcome to this episode of Answering the Call to Write.
Thank you, Melissa. It's such a joy to be with you today. Thank you so much.
I am so interested to learn a little bit more about your journey leading up to this point, and particularly what made you choose counseling as a career path.
Well, when I was young, I was the youngest of five children, and I was significantly younger. My closest sibling was 5 years older than I was. And I lived on a farm in southern Saskatchewan, so I was fairly isolating back in those days without cell phones and all of those kind of things. And so I actually was a fairly lonely child, and I felt like I wasn't connected to people to the degree that I needed to be. And so honestly, when I was about 12 years old, I made a decision that I was going to be a really good friend to people. And when I made that decision in my small little community of 400 people, I kind of became the school counselor. And I also had a sister-in-law that was a social worker that was 8 years older than me. And so I looked to her for guidance in terms of her career and just watched her as she helped people. And so honestly, probably by the time I was 16, I decided that I wanted to be a counselor and I wanted to help people, and especially youth. That was my format. That was my forte. I thought I was going to go into counseling with youth. And then once I got into my program and into my practicum, I was working with youth, but I had the opportunity to work with some women as well. And I realized that actually I was drawn to help heal the little child within women who had been molested or abused and had trauma in their childhood. And so I realized that actually it was like working with youth to work with the little person, the wounded person within. And so that's really how I ended up working in counseling. And then I did come to the Pacific Northwest in 1986, got my degree in counseling. I worked for a few organizations for a few years, and then I've been in private practice now for the last 27 years. So,
Wow, that's amazing. I love that you had that little spark of destiny already in your heart as a little girl, and that you've pursued that and you followed that. And then after 3 decades, you decide to write your book. Now, I know this has taken a while to get to this point. I know it's not been a particularly easy journey, but what was that moment when you received that call or that unction to write your book?
that is a fairly lengthy story. So actually, the very first seed that was planted was 22 years ago. I taught a class for my church leadership, and the class was called "What's in Your Backpack?" And at that point, I was talking about what we're responsible for. How do we carry our own load and take care of ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, so that we don't burn out. Again, with church leadership, people were burning the candle at both ends. And so I had spoken through this class about taking care of ourselves and living, loving each other and loving people well, but also loving ourselves. And at the end of that class, a precious friend named Jody Mosier came up to me and she said to me, "Glenda, you need to write a book." And I said, "Oh, Jody, that's not going to be happening. I have no thought about doing that." So then I continued to teach that class in our community with different clients and people in the community. And for the next 14 years, continued to do that. And then about 8 years ago, after other people had come to me and suggested that it would be important for me to possibly put that in writing, I decided that I would do that. So I started writing about 8 years ago. And at the time, I was going to self-publish and just have it available as a book and a workbook to be able to hand to my clients and be able to say, read chapter 3, read chapter 5, and then come back and we'll talk about it, knowing that that would reduce the counseling process significantly. And so that was my intention 8 years ago when I started. However, then about 4 years ago with COVID, I was introduced to an online mentoring community and publishing community. And through that process, I realized that I wanted to actually have a publisher and go a little different route. And then this year, I found Paper Crown Media, answering the call on Paper Crown Media, you precious people that have a heart to support authors. And so you guys have helped me cross the finish line on that. So, and then actually I should say too, in my writing in the last 8 years, and through that process, I was getting stuck in terms of trying to figure out how do I transpose or transmit the information of backpacks that I've been teaching. How do I make that make sense in a book? And I realized it was very difficult because the term backpack is difficult to read over and over and over again. And so about 2.5 years ago, I had gone away on a retreat at an Airbnb, and I just was stuck. I had kind of hit a wall, and I just sort of, in desperation, kind of cried out to God and said, "Okay, I need direction. What am I going to do with this?" And at that point, I had the revelation that I needed to use the analogy of having keys instead of talking about backpacks. And it's the similar material, but I've changed the analogy. So then I trashed my book, all the what I had written up until that point, and I started over 2.5 years ago. But that's really how I ended up here. So
Yeah. Well, I can relate to that a little bit because I too had written an entire manuscript before I realized that it needed a complete overhaul. And I think I rewrote that manuscript several times, at least 3 times, if not more. And even by the time I thought I'm done, I heard the Holy Spirit say, "Nope, I think it needs to be from the father's perspective," when I wrote Untangled. So I know what it feels like to have to go back to the drawing board and start again. But I think there's so much that happens in that writing process to the author themselves as well. It's such a process of unpacking our own stuff with the Holy
yes,
Spirit and with God. And it can be an incredible time, even though it's not easy, it's an incredible time of self-reflection and healing and working with the Holy Spirit. Um, so what I love about your book is that it is so practical. It's not just a book, it is a workbook. And it's got such amazing keys in there for people. I just want to talk a little bit about the keys themselves because you tell people that they possess the keys to make a significant change in every area of their life. And your subtitle is Victim, Survivor, Warrior. And you say that you choose, the choice is yours. Can you just unpack that a little bit for us? What are these keys? And how do we know that we have these keys? Do we have to go find them somewhere or do we already possess them?
Well, I do believe for those that are mentally well, so it's a little different when there's a different level of mental illness potentially. But for people that are fairly mentally well, we all have these 9 keys, and there's more, but this is the 9 that I focused on. And so those keys are the key of love, motives, choices, beliefs, thoughts, feelings, actions, limits, and responses.
Right.
And how we handle those keys determines whether we live as a victim or as a survivor or as a warrior. So for any of us that have had trauma or abuse or loss, difficult childhood issues, or even young adult issues, that have felt victimized. Some people, depending on the dynamics of who they are as a person, their childhood, well, not just their childhood and their upbringing, but their personality, whether they're male or female, how many siblings they had. There's different dynamics that cause us to process life a certain way. And so when we've experienced difficult things and have been victimized, some people get stuck in staying as a victim. And some people, because of their personality, are a little bit more driven. They're a little bit more extroverted. They're a little bit more assertive or aggressive than passive. And so then they function more in a survivor mode. And often people are either stuck in victim in some areas of their life and survivor in other areas of their life. So for instance, somebody could be very, very driven to succeed financially and make a lot of money and be very well off financially on some level and be very, like in a survivor mode in terms of driven and pushing to do that. At the same time, they could be on the other extreme and be very irresponsible with their money. And that's more of setting themselves up to be a victim.
Right.
So we live in these extremes often instead of in the balance where as a warrior, we take responsibility for those 9 keys and we use them all as they're intended. And so regarding love, we love ourselves, but we love other people well. Regarding motives, our motives are pure and honest, and we're not manipulative, or we're not coming from a motive of shame, or performance oriented, those kind of dynamics. So with each of the keys, there's a way that we take responsibility to live as a warrior versus if we let go of our keys or we allow other people to take our keys, we live as victims.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we choose to take other people's keys, we actually just live as survivors.
Right.
So we all function on some level in those extremes or in the balance in every area of our life. And so no matter where we are in our life, we can all improve from victim to survivor to warrior.
Yeah.
So that's in a nutshell,
Yes.
so what the 9 keys are all about.
Yeah. There are so many different topics you actually touch on in this book. You talk about identifying how your life experiences have shaped your self-worth. So you touch on self-worth, you touch on false beliefs, and all or nothing thinking and the need for control and perfectionism. You talk about uncovering issues that has created shame, fear, and addiction. You talk about how to understand the anger cycle and learning valuable tools to deal with conflict, which I think is just so needed, especially in the time that we're living in, and how to reveal your authentic self and enjoy meaningful relationships. Could you share maybe just one or two of these things. I think let's maybe talk about perfectionism, because I think that's something that I see a lot of authors actually deal with, not getting to the place where they feel they are completely happy with what they've produced. Can you talk a little bit about that need to be perfect?
Mhm. Yeah, I do see that perfectionism and procrastination actually, and not everyone would agree with me, and this is fine. That's fine. But I tend to believe that perfectionism and procrastination are actually two sides of the same coin, and both issues are driven by a low self-esteem. So we're trying to prove ourselves in some way. So with perfectionism, if I can be perfect or if I can have control of everything outside of myself, somehow I feel like I have control inside of myself. But that's not accurate. And that's a challenge to try to always have all of our ducks in a row and have everything lined up externally. And so we have way more control if we control what we can control, which is our 9 keys. If we really possess our 9 keys and we control those things well, we're going to have more control and hopefully a higher sense of self-esteem. Um, so anyway, so yeah, so perfectionism is a drivenness to try to prove our worth, to try to make ourselves look better to other people, or to appear that we have it all together, when really maybe we're just really scattered and really struggling and really not feeling very good about ourselves. And then actually procrastination is, like I say, the other side of that coin. I believe that procrastinators are perfectionists as well, but they just procrastinate because they can't do whatever the job is well enough.
Right.
And so they don't do it at all. They don't start it at all. So if there's a task that's going to take them, say, 4 to 6 hours, and they don't have a 4 to 6 hour window of time, instead of starting it and doing a half an hour and then doing another 40 minutes in 3 days from now and another hour in a week from now, they just don't start it at all. And then it just piles up and piles up and piles up. So I believe that that actually is also coming from low self-esteem, having to have things be perfect. It just looks like the other extreme. So again, based on victim survivor, often victims procrastinate and survivors are perfectionists in
Wow.
general.
Right. That's very interesting. So you were saying in your book as well, you talk about how life experiences kind of pushes us into the shadows, that there are these false ideas or false concepts of who we are. So how do we come out of that shadow and then live in our authentic self?
Yeah, so I have a chapter on our defense mechanisms basically, and our need to be honest. And ultimately, we have to be honest with ourselves. First of all, we have to come out of denial. We have to quit justifying and rationalizing and blaming other people. Victims blame other people instead of take responsibility for their issues. And so we need to have the light turned on, and we need to have self-awareness and revelation about what our issues are. And that often can't be done by ourselves. We need other people, we need community, we need other people that see us, know us, love us, to point out some of those things where maybe we're getting off track and we're in the dark instead of having light be shone on us. And then once we have that self-awareness, then we can have a growth, hopefully adopt a growth mindset that says, okay, this isn't good for me. I'm not living an abundant life. I don't have healthy relationships in my life, and I can change. And that is the main purpose of my book, or the main hope that people would recognize as they read my book, is that no matter where you are, no matter where you've come from, no matter what your life experiences have been, as difficult and as traumatic and as hard as those might have been, we can all change. We can all do a turnaround and today decide we're going to go the other direction. We're going to think differently. We're going to express our feelings differently. We're going to take care of ourselves and love people differently, love ourselves differently. But before any of that can happen, we've got to have awareness, and then we need to do that, for ourselves with a counselor, in community. We can't change by ourselves. We can't be isolated and hope to change much about our own position if we're not connecting to other people relationally.
Yeah. So I've got a bit of an odd question.
Okay.
So this question is really about if you recognize that type of behavior in somebody else and you want to help them
Mhm.
see those blind spots, what is a good way that you can approach them? I mean, you can give them a copy of your book, but I think so often blind spots are called blind spots because we can't see them in
Right.
ourselves, but we can often see them in others. And that doesn't mean that we're perfect. It's just that, it's always easier to see what's up with someone else sometimes. And I think, it's just proving your comment about community. It's important to be able to be in community so we can help each other see those blind spots. But I know getting feedback from others can sometimes be a little bit tough for people to receive if they're not open to it. So do you have any advice for giving people feedback?
Mhm. I think, first of all, we do have to make sure that we have relationship.
Hmm.
For people don't want to hear what we have to say unless they know our heart for them, unless they
Yes.
know that our motive is right, unless they know that they can trust us. Because otherwise, that feels defensive for people to hear anything that we might want to say. Secondly, I think it's really important to recognize that it's their choice about whether they hear us or not. And it is their choice about what they do with that information. So it's not that we say something to try to fix somebody, but it might just be reflecting something to them that might help them think a little bit and pause to recognize how they're coming across or how they're impacting the people around them or how they're impacting their own life. And so we speak truth and love in that way. We're not going to do that aggressively. Again, going back to the victim, survivor, warrior, victims are passive and they don't share what they think or feel. And survivors can tend to be aggressive in how they communicate, but warriors are assertive. Warriors are confident and are able to just share from their heart. And it'll sound something more like, would you mind if I gave you a new perspective? Would you mind if I shared something with you that might help you grow, that might help you recognize an area that maybe that you haven't been able to see? And so it's almost posed in a question of, can I challenge you? Would you mind if I shared this with you? And instead of saying, you whatever it is,
You have
you
this massive blind spot.
yeah, you always do this to me. Well, no, the you is definitely not something that should be used when we have conflict or when we're trying to work something out with someone. And so it's truth in love, it's having a relationship, and then it's coming alongside of someone and so that they feel the love, the support, the encouragement, and they know that we're going to be there with them and through the process with them. And it's not something that they're going to feel condemned or judged or criticized by, and just giving them permission. You can do whatever you want to do with this. You don't need to do anything. That's your choice. I just want to give you my thoughts, my perspective of how this might be impacting how you're living or how you're relating to other people.
Awesome. So if you had to take the core message of your book and put it into one thought, what would you want the reader to walk away with once they've read your book? What is the most important piece of information that you want to impart to them?
Our experiences impact our lives, and often that's our childhood. But I can honestly say that I've also had people that have come from fairly stable environments where they did have parents that were very involved in their lives. They did have fairly healthy communication in their world, but then some other trauma happened. Maybe they lost a friend in an accident when they were 8 or 10 or 12, and they had no capacity to process that, and nobody helped them with that. Or maybe they lost a parent, or maybe they had some other abuse happen in their teenage years along the way. There can be other things other than an unstable family environment. But the reality is that whatever has happened to us has shaped us. We live what we learn. We develop skills based on our personality and whether we're male or female. And again, the number of siblings we have and all of those kind of dynamics, we process things a certain way, and then we perceive things and we develop whatever skill we need to survive those experiences. And so my hope would be that everybody could really recognize that on a different level, that it's not just psychobabble to go back and look in the past, because we can learn from the past and we can't change what we're not aware of. And so it is important to look back at our experiences and recognize how we process that and what skills, coping skills, defense mechanisms, whatever the case may be, we started to use to survive. And then recognize that we don't have to stay stuck there. We really can move forward. We really can choose to be responsible for ourselves. And regardless of what's happened, even if that means really needing to forgive really, really difficult circumstances, we can move forward. We don't have to stay stuck in our past. And we don't have to be a victim, and we don't even have to be a survivor. We can be warriors.
That's such a powerful truth. Glenda, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today. And I just want to ask if anybody's resonating with this and they want to get a copy of your book, or they want to connect with you personally. I know you're giving away a free copy of your chapter in your book, one of your chapters. How can people connect with you, and how can they get a copy of your book?
So my website is my name, glendabigalky.com. And so there you can find the connection to Amazon to be able to purchase my book through Amazon, but you also can download a free chapter that'll give you a really good overview of the whole book. And so I would invite people to do that, check that out, decide whether that's something that they would want to pursue or not. And then also I'm on Facebook. My counselor Facebook page is Glenda Bigalky, counselor/writer. And then also on Instagram at Glenda Bigalky.
Awesome. So one of the questions I always ask my guests who have written and published books is, what is your favorite part of being an author?
That is a great question. And let me preface it by saying, even though I have been published for almost 2 months now, I would say that it's still sort of just sinking in. The process has been so long. I lived my book, controlling what I could control in so many different ways in the last 8 years. So it's just starting to sink in that I am an author. But I think the biggest blessing for me in that process is just being able to connect to people, and hopefully being able to help people have light bulb experiences. I actually had an experience just at a yard sale a few weeks ago, where I was looking for books that I wanted to use as part of my centerpieces for a book signing I was doing. And I got talking to the person that was holding the yard sale, and I would say she's probably in her 70s. And she asked me a question about forgiveness. And I had just paid her $12 for these books that I had purchased. And so we started talking, and she asked me this question about forgiveness. And she asked me about forgiveness. How do you forgive if people keep hurting you? And I started to share with her about the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, and that we don't have to necessarily reconcile if people aren't safe in our world, but forgiveness really is an issue between us and God, and it really is important for our own heart, so that we can heal and move on, even if we do need to continue to set boundaries with those people. And in that conversation, she just sort of threw her head back and she said, "Oh my goodness, that just changed my whole perspective." And she reached in
Wow.
her pocket and she handed me my $12 back. And,
Wow.
and she said to me, "I want to support what you're doing." And she said, if you've got that kind of information or advice or wisdom to share with people, I'm all for what you're doing. And so she was so precious, and she just handed me my money back. So those kinds of experiences, I just love being able to interact with people. I think my heart for, as you had said, Melissa, there's so many different things that I address in the book, but really the forte is about conflict resolution. That is my soapbox. That is my desire to see people resolve conflict and have healthy interdependent relationships. And the only way we can do that is if we resolve the internal conflict first. We have to resolve the conflict that's going on inside of us so that we can actually have the tools and the skills that we need to be able to engage with other people and resolve conflict with other people. But that's amazing to me when I can watch people have light bulb experiences and go deeper in their relationships, and I see them connect. I see the shame fall off of them, and I see them be able to connect in relationships and really be able to thrive in life instead of just exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful mission to have. I just think that is so powerful. Glenda, this podcast is called Answering the Call to Write, and we have potential authors listening. What advice do you have for someone who is thinking of writing their book and they haven't yet taken that next step?
First of all, feel the fear and do it anyway. Secondly, you don't need to have all the answers and all the steps in place. You just need to be connected to people that do. And answering the call is the right team of people that will lead you through all of that. Thirdly, when you're discouraged, just keep going and let people be there for you. I had a prayer team of 5 women that literally have stood by me probably for the last 5 years. And I text them, I called them, and just always said to them, "This is what I'm struggling with," or "This is where I'm at in the process." And they encouraged me along the way, and they kind of held me accountable. So just do it. Just do it. It's one of those things that you don't know the things that you don't know.
Yes.
But when you partner with people that do know, they make it simple, they make it easy. Now on the other side of it, it's like I just can't believe I'm here and that I have the knowledge that I have based on what I didn't know.
Yeah.
But if I were to write another book, I would be so far ahead now because I have a sense of all of those steps in that whole process.
Yeah.
So just if there's something stirring in you, if somebody has said to you, you've got a message, just trust that still small voice within you and pursue the process and get support. You don't have to do it alone,
Yeah.
but get the support you need and partner with great people like Paper Crown Media and just be able to trust that they'll help you with the things that you don't know. Just persevere and build a team of people around you that'll support you, and you'll make it through.
Yeah. That's great advice. Thank you so much. And thanks for the shout out. So, for anyone listening, if you are interested in connecting with Glenda, the website and the link to her free chapter will be in the description below. We will also put some links in there for you if you're interested in writing a book or you want to join our Paper Crown Media subscription. We offer so many tools to help you on your journey to write and publish the story that you were born to write. So thank you so much for watching. Glenda, thank you for your time, for your expertise. And I just speak a big blessing on your book. I know it's going to unlock a lot of people and help them come out of their shadows and live as their authentic warrior selves.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's just such a joy to be with you today. I appreciate you so much. Thank you, dear.
Thanks, me too. Thank you, you too. Thank you everyone for watching. We will see you again, same place next week. Bye.